Hello and welcome everybody to According to Andrew number 61, Commodity versus Fiat Money. Um, I talked about in the last one how I wanted to get into the sub-treasury system by Charles McAnew. But before that, I wanted to go through kind of these differences between currency and fiat money and stuff like that. It's going to set a good groundwork for the stuff that we're going to talk about the sub-treasury system because it gets away from the classical idea of your money has to be backed in gold and silver, which I personally agree with. And I wanted to kind of share some of the ideas and limits to maybe that and my own perspectives on that kind of stuff before we got into that. It'll also give me a couple more days to research the sub-treasury plan and make sure that I got all of my information good to go on that. So, where to begin? Let's start with how money's created. So, uh, basically, our current monetary system, people declare that it was created basically through fiat, through governments declaring that this is the currency that's going to be used. And there's certainly some truth in that, but it's not the only factor. I know libertarians, one of the arguments that they like to use is that the marketplace can decide what money is. And so and they claim that governments come in and they warp that by forcing everybody to use a certain commodity. But I would argue that they are simply another player in the marketplace, and because they happen to have one of the biggest swings, or because everybody de facto has to use their currency, that they're the ones that decide the currency and are able to win out in that regard. And we've also seen in previous, it wasn't until the establishment of the state that monetary money was locked down under the purview of the state. Other exchanges worked as well, and they did things like measuring and stuff like that. The advantage of keeping it as one currency within your own state system is that you don't have to constantly be measuring and figuring out, okay, well this gold weighs this much, and it kind of it covers up for some amounts of fraud if people were like just using lead or something like that in their currency, and it just makes exchanges easier. But that's a side issue. Well, let's get into the libertarian argument. So, government creates currency by declaring that certain items are suitable for payment for taxes and debt, and that's how they influence what the money is, thus creating money. One argument the libertarians make is that that absent of a forced currency, the free market would decide what the currency would be through the most redeemable item of barter becoming the currency. However, this is effectively what happens when when governments declare a currency, as they are the biggest player in the market, as everyone who has to exchange with them, due to the needing of pay taxes, to the loathing of all libertarians. This is a market force like the others, and like any other market stall that will only accept certain things for exchange. Since everyone already needs that money anyway to pay their taxes, they use the currency to adopt they use this currency, and is adopted as the most convenient medium of exchange through the whole economy. The market's however, the market can step up when things get out of control. So the market steps up when hyperinflation occurs. A great example of this is actually from the game Diablo 2, when a common ring drop became the de facto currency after so much gold, the declared currency in the video game, lost all its value of exchange between players because of hyperinflation. Where it still had to be used with NPCs and other game aspects, gold was still used, but due to the sheer quantity of this became its only function, and its utility in other respects of the economy had become frivolous. Now, I am unaware of a currency replacement happening in real life, but once hyperinflation in a nation does occur, that currency is reserved for payment of debts and taxes, while the people can devise a new currency as they adopt bartering until one emerges. So, I think that's a way to kind of have the libertarians use the libertarians' argument and still incorporate that into when governments are within that system of that market. They're they always claim these things are free market, and they don't truly exist. And government's still made up of people, so I don't know why they wouldn't count within the market structure. But anyway, they do have certain privileges that other groups don't. So in that regard, I understand where they have their issues. But let's get into this idea of fiat money, though, because it causes certain contentions with people, and I understand it. So, of course, the main thing that holds fiat money back from being adopted by the wider populace is a lack of trust that the government isn't going to simply print more money until hyperinflation occurs. And this is mainly the main argument for commodity-backed money. This is why currencies have tended to be backed by something traditionally, because it limits the amount of money that can be printed theoretically. In this regard, gold and silver backed currencies have done fairly well over the long run in preventing inflation. And we see this throughout the Middle Ages. Gold and silver was basically the money. It wasn't actually backed, it was just gold and silver coins. And they basically experienced no more than 1% inflation a year, and sometimes they experience deflation. We'll get into inflation versus deflation, what the net benefit or downside is, in a bit. In this regard, gold and silver backed currencies have done very well in preventing inflation. Even the current terrible debt-backed currency system that we have, which is the US dollar, has a limit based on the amount of total loans that are going to be taken out. So our current monetary system is backed in debt, and the way it's backed in debt is basically you take out a loan and you say, I will pay back this loan, and then they basically print that money that the loan is taken out for, and that's how money's created in our current system, and it is backed by your promise to pay and work until that debt is paid back. It has a lot of issues, but as long as there's someone willing to take out a loan, the money supply can grow, and the instant it stops, people stop taking out loans, the money supply can no longer grow. Now, it completely collapses for other reasons, but that aside, it is backed. It's not just funny money. It's not just it has no meaning or value, or like the money isn't connected to nothing. It is connected to something. And as we see with this example time and time again, it is actually always connected to something. We call it fiat money or funny money or monopoly money or whatever, but the truth of the matter is that money is backed in something. Whether it's gold or silver or oil or the another U.S. dollar, or the fact that it can be redeemed for loans and taxes, there is some real world tangible thing that can be done with the money, even if it is just a piece of paper. And so this is where the idea of fiat money isn't truly fiat. I don't think there is anything that is truly a fiat money, and if it does kind of reach that fiat money standard, usually hyperinflation sets in pretty quickly as people stop accepting it as useful currency. And that the hyperinflation is kind of like a chicken or the egg. What comes first? The people seeing it as fiat money or hyperinflation, and it's probably the hyperinflation than people disregarding the currency. But yeah. So speaking of this hyperinflation and deflation and stuff like that, I think it'd be interesting to look at purchasing power. And generally people say as inflation occurs, your purchasing power goes down. And there's certainly a logic to that, but I would like to explore that idea more. So also let's look into the idea of deflation. Into deflation versus purchasing power. Deflationists will claim your purchasing power improves when the currency deflates, but it seems like it's a wash, and depending on what you produce determines if you win or lose. Basically what I mean by that is if you are a net producer of stuff, right, like let's say you're a farmer and you have to produce grain and stuff like that, in a deflationist economy, because you have to sell a commodity, and all of a sudden that commodity has lowered its overall value, now all of a sudden, because your income is based on what you can sell for that, now all of a sudden you don't have any money, or you have less money. On the same token, if you're a worker, basically, and you're getting paid the same to produce the same amount of value as the currency is going down, yes, your purchasing power is going to go up. But just like when you artificially set what's the minimum wage, now all of a sudden you basically got a raise without actually doing anything, and that now your job is potentially on the chopping block, and now you're going to go from making a good amount of money that and your purchasing power increasing to making no money, and therefore the increased purchasing power of your money basically doesn't mean anything because you don't have an income. And so you can see these interactions. And so like the net effect of deflation is basically a wash. But anyway, let's continue on. Inflation, wages lag. In inflation, wages lag behind cost of goods, reducing purchasing power. In deflation, wages lag behind goods again, but as companies' profit margins get crushed, so do their ability to pay their workers. So either you get laid off and no additional purchasing power is realized, or you take a pay cut and again no purchasing power is increase is realized, except over the brief window where the deflation wasn't noticed and there was a lag. Due to the disruption of the situation, it is not really any better or worse than inflation. So that's kind of my thoughts on deflation versus inflation. There's certain times where things get so out of control or some aspects of the economy become so inflated that deflation is probably a net good. So if we think of housing prices currently, how they're so overly inflated and stuff like that, there's aspects to it that it can get out of control, but I don't think it's necessarily a net bad. And it if it can be, the ideal situation is that the money supply grows with the economy, right? So you have your money supply, and as more and more stuff, so like let's say you have a money supply and it's at a set value. As the economy grows and more stuff is produced and more production is realized, that money has to there's going to be deflation because that money has to cover the exchanges of more and more things because there's more stuff to exchange that money for within the economy. And so it eventually gets to a point where it can't cover the amount of economy, and then it either stifles economic growth or it causes other issues where you just kind of nobody wants to exchange stuff for money anymore because it just doesn't, it's not useful. There's not enough in the economy to actually flow around the economy. So, and then it's probably exchanged for another good or service or something like that. So the ideal is having it expand with it. Now, the other problem is, how do you determine that the money supply is going to actually expand with the economy? How do you tie that to it in a certain way? And that's where the sub-treasury system, I think, created a really smart way to tie that together. But basically, if you could somehow figure out a way to tie the productive labor of your society, GDP is kind of a representative of that, but it's been so manipulated and changed over the years that seems like a dangerous way to do it. But if there's a way to tie your money to the productive output of your nation, then you would tie your money to that and tie your money printing to that as well. So that would be the ideal. I want to figure out how to do that. I haven't been able to figure that out yet, and it's something I've been kind of working on. If anybody has any ideas, I'd love to hear them. So in that regard, let's kind of get into this idea of intrinsic value of money, because that's something that comes up over and over again as well, and we kind of talked about it with the Fiat stuff. I should have touched on this earlier, but actually before we do that, let's stay on topic here, and let's look at inflation. So we were looking at inflation versus deflation. So let's go into kind of money and where the gold and the silver kind of fall short in terms of the fiat. So actually, we are going to go into intrinsic value first because I think it's going to be it's going to set up the last point. So money cannot be based on the intrinsic value of the currency being used. Sure, gold and silver have uses outside of the currency, but if the trust in the exchangeability of that currency has lost faith, what would the average person do to be able to do? Sure, gold and silver have uses outside of the currency, but if the trust in the exchangeability of that currency has disappeared, what would an average person be able to do with this now defunct currency? Sure, they could give it to a goldsmith in exchange for something, but if there is no money, the goldsmith cannot give them uh, what what can the goldsmith give them that the person with the gold slash silver exchange? Oh my gosh, I wrote this terribly. Uh, Basically, what can the goldsmith give them that would be able to be used to exchange for something like food or something like that? If people aren't accepting gold and silver, sure, they have uses inside an economy, but they're in very complex things. Like let's say, okay, well now I have all this silver eh, or, or gold, and I need something to do with it because they can't be turned into money and just exchanged for other things. So I have to create something I can barter with. Okay, well they're using like processor chips and stuff like that. Okay, well you're gonna go and make some processor chips out of this stuff, and then how are you gonna exchange that for food and other things that you need? It just doesn't work. It You just need money to be a means of exchange. It needs to be a medium of exchange, and we'll look at this these kind of two competing ideas of what money is, and maybe a way to uh, create a bifurcated system uh, that that functions separate from the other as a way of holding value versus being a medium of exchange, because they're in certain aspects they compete with each other. So uh, basically, it becomes a barter dead end, and as things of actual value in that moment would be food and firewood. As such, gold and silver's intrinsic value rests on the ability to exchange goods for money, and as in a pure barter system, they have almost no value because you can't eat gold and silver. The only thing they don't tarnish, and that well, silver tarnishes, but gold and stuff like they don't tarnish, and they hold for a long time, so that in a sense gives them value. But the primary reason that gold and silver were used as currency is, again, it's because they don't they can be stamped and created into things that say it's of this certain amount of value, and that they don't tarnish like food would, so that they can be used long term for exchangeable stuff. But like that's the benefits as a medium of exchange, not necessarily as the intrinsic value of the currency itself. Of like, oh well, we use this to exchange because we can make microchips out of it. So that's my thoughts on that. And uh, so on these two competing ideas of what money can do, we have these these different ideas. So people want money to fill two competing goals simultaneously. One goal is to be a medium of exchange. The other is to be a store of value that maintains purchasing power over time. Initially, when looking at these 2 points, it might seem like they are not in contradiction, but when you have an ever expanding economy, they are. If you have an expanding economy and the money supply doesn't expand, then deflation will occur, hindering the money's ability to be a medium of exchange, but will be a good store of value as it actually is increasing in value. But this increasing in value also has a deleterious effect on its exchangeability within the economy. Uh, the reverse of that, of course, is if you have an expanding economy and expanding money supply, uh, that uh, okay, so then the middle road is the ideal road. So if you have an expanding money supply and an expanding economy, then as long as the money supply doesn't expand faster than the economy, the money functions as a medium of exchange and your purchasing power is maintained. So that's the one and only situation in which both of these situations can be filled simultaneously, and that relies on somehow that being a perfect condition that is maintained. However, this is an ideal scenario, which seems unlikely if the money supply grows faster than the, uh, and so it's not that it couldn't happen, but being able to maintain that over a long period of time with all the changing factors and all this stuff, like even if just a new technology got introduced and made people far more productive, and that wasn't initially caught, like let's say you figured out some algorithm that in your current economic state would make it so that it your money supply kept up with the expansion of the economy, and some new technology got invented that boosted the productivity of a bunch of people that that equation didn't factor in for, and couldn't have possibly factored in for. And now all of a sudden you need to redo the whole thing, and you need to increase your overall money supply and stuff like that. And so it's an ideal to work towards, but it's not something that's ever going to be able to be achieved. You're always going to be inflating or deflating the currency at any given time. And maybe the best system is one that can oscillate between the two to address the needs at the current moment. Obviously, the downside of that is if bankers get that in their hands, as we've seen in the past, they just kind of use that to line their own pockets. That's what bankers do, though. So I don't know. Anyway, continuing on. Uh, so if the money supply grows faster than the economy, the purchasing power of money falls. But money as a medium of exchange is still functional outside of the hyperinflation situation. So, and in a certain extent, the having extra money in the economy allows it to flow around the economy a little bit easier. There's probably a limit, right? So if we think about it as a set of gears, there's probably an ideal amount, but if you put a little bit extra in, maybe it runs a little bit better, or it's longer before you need to squirt some more oil in there or something like that. But if you put too much in, then maybe it it uh, it clogs it up so that there's not enough space for it to turn, or it invites more dust in and clogs up the gears, and so that it has the opposite effect of what you wanted it to do. Um, so uh, so then the best way to have a functioning money supply is to have a two-layer system, a medium that is fiat and is allowed to expand with the economy, and a commodity that maintains its purchasing power over time. To this end, a fiat currency with silver and gold used as savings would work. Uh, it is kind of like a reverse gold standard. So what I mean by that is you would basically have some kind of fiat money that was printed, and you would base that on something within the economy to grow it, and then if you had like a savings account, right? Your savings account wouldn't be, here, Mr. Banker, here's some money of mine, can you hold on to that for me? What it would be basically is you would go with your money, and if you wanted to save your money, you would go and buy gold and silver, physical gold and silver, and then you would hold on to that. And one of the phrases from or one thing I've heard about gold is 1 ounce of gold will buy you a gentleman's suit, right? So no matter what time period you're in, where a gentleman's suit costs a massive amount of money, or it was something that was fairly affordable back in the day just due to inflation, both the gold has maintained its purchasing power over that time period, basically. And I'm sure there's some shifts here and there, but that's just because of the expanding money supply and expanding economy and what can be done with those various sets of money. So in a certain sense, the gold has maybe lost some of its purchasing power, or maybe gained it in certain areas, and that's also dependent on how much gold is mined up and the demand for it. But and same with silver, but you could use gold and silver basically as a bank account, and then when you needed cash for something, and you didn't want to save things anymore, you would sell this gold to someone, get the cash, use that for whatever venture you wanted to do. Maybe you were going to start a company, and so you needed a cash injection or something like that, and so that's a way you could create a savings system. And I think this is a better way, and maybe quite frankly, this is a system that doesn't require any government like, you can just start doing this. This is how you can treat your money going forward. Instead of having a savings account at your local bank, you take all that money and you buy physical gold and silver and you keep it somewhere. And then you use that as your means of savings. It's not as like, when you need to tap into that, it's not as convenient as having like a savings account. So in that regard, I understand maybe people don't want to do it, or maybe you have you have your savings account, you have kind of your gold silver savings and stuff like that, and these are kind of different options that people have available to them. But thinking of I was never a huge fan, and I always thought gold and silver was kind of like an oversold thing. But when I think about it as a means of saving within the economy, or basically having gold and silver be my savings account that isn't going to decrease in value even as the dollar fluctuates up and down. That thinking of it in that regard, I think it has a very high value. Um, and so, depending on when I, you know, get more money coming in, stuff like that, that might be a option that I look for and moving forward. I wouldn't personally. I don't trust any institutions anymore to uh, give me a piece of paper that says I have gold or silver and stuff like that with them. Um, Now, those pieces of paper are again more convenient when I want to go sell that stuff, but I do not trust it at all, and I would want physical deliveries of both gold and silver if I was going to be going this basically bank account, silver gold bank account route. Or savings account route, if you want to think about it that way. So those are kind of my thoughts on gold, silver, some of the different aspects of fiat money, how those commodities work together. It was kind of a mishmash of stuff, but I think it gives some good foundational ideas and ways to think about stuff that will be useful when we talk about the sub-treasury system come Friday, because the sub-treasury system basically backed was the closest thing I've seen to creating a labor-backed currency. Um, and so I think that's a really cool idea and something that we should push for and push towards. I think it has a lot of value, but we will look at that on Friday. Hopefully, you guys all found this very interesting and useful. If you think it was useful, let me know down in the comment section. And this can be found on YouTube and BitChute when they allow me to upload, and Podbean. And I had Odyssey going, but there's something about like needing to pay for it or something to upload, so I gotta figure that out. But those are where I'm at. So yeah, leave a like and comment down there, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. Anyway, hopefully you guys have a good day and have a good one. Bye.